and I've always considered our next guest one of the good guys. I've known him for years. He is a Democratic strategist, but he works with progressives. He works with the good ones. He is co-founder and president of Progressive Strategies, which is a consulting group. He is a veteran of the Clinton White House, and he is the author of a new book entitled How to Democrat in the Age of Trump. Mike Lux, welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be on. You've always been a good friend and an ally, and I'm glad to be on with you.
Well, and it's good to have you, and it's good to read this book, which I've been getting quite a bit out of. I think you state your case clearly, and I agree with what you have to say about what the Democratic Party needs to do, about what the progressive movement needs to do. I really like your conclusions here. I do have to say before we start that I didn't realize that Democrat was a verb.
Well, you know, we kind of did this on purpose. We feel like Democrat should be a verb, that Democrats need to act, Democrats need to move, Democrats need to do things. And right now they're sitting on their butt too much. And so we kind of wanted to make a point with the title of the book, turn Democrat into a verb.
Well, I like that, and maybe it'll be a new verb. You know, I don't know if you know this about me, Mike, but actually for a while I left the Democratic Party. I got very disillusioned when the leadership was talking about grand bargains and Social Security cuts, and I was living in a district where it didn't seem to make a difference whether I was Democrat or not, because I was in California. There's a crazy open primary system. But I moved to D.C. and then to Maryland, and I'm in the party again so that I can vote for progressives in my primary and maybe make a difference that way. But you really address in this book, in my opinion, you address some of the ways in which the party went astray. Maybe you didn't feel as strongly about it as I did, or didn't take as extreme measures as I did, but you certainly seemed to get the diagnosis right. And in your words, what would you say maybe caused the party to go astray a little bit?
Well, frankly, I think we lost our way. You know, I was in the Clinton White House, and I was one of the lefties in the Clinton White House. In fact, I was a liaison to the progressive world in a whole lot of ways, both formally and informally. But I think we went astray in the Clinton years because we got too close. We as an administration got too close to big business, to big banks, to Wall Street. And when we started deregulating businesses, the media business, Wall Street, other big businesses, we did the trade deals, which turned out to be bad for working people. When we started doing all of that, we lost our way, and I think ever since then, Democrats have been trying to figure out what the hell we stand for, what the hell who we're going to fight for, and I think we need to get back to the days when we were fighting for people, when we were fighting for regular working folks of all colors, of all creeds, of all regions, not just in the big cities, not just the white working class, which some people obsess about, but everybody. And we lost our way. And then in the Obama years, I think in some ways it got even worse. Obama was more liberal on some issues, but the fact that he didn't prosecute the bankers who caused the financial meltdown, the fact that he let Wall Street off without restructuring, I think was sort of the turning point in the last 10 years, and drove away both working class swing voters and what Democrats call their base voters, more progressive voters, and alienated a lot of people.
You know, it's such an interesting question, and you've known some of the principles in this sort of drama of the Democratic Party much better than I. But, I've had people say to me, for example, because I've been critical of the Clintons or of Barack Obama, why do you dislike them, for example. And you know, my answer is always, and I'm really interested in your thoughts on this, I don't dislike them, but I think there's a process that happens where maybe if you come up from the outside, like Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, you're from Hope, Arkansas, or from Hawaii, just far from the centers of power and wealth, that you get drawn into this world of the powerful and the wealthy and the titans of the private sector and so on, and the big contributors. And I think of it more as a kind of seduction, or than I do as a kind of, you know, terrible sellout or all of that. I just think people get born into it. I almost wonder if more of our Democratic leaders, if Franklin D. Roosevelt grew up around wealth and power, and so it didn't really charm him, you know, or persuade him. I just think that we need a new breed of Democrat. If the Democratic Party is going to make a difference, we need people like, you know, Elizabeth Warren, who I know you've worked a lot with, who is just not. She came from the outside too, but from Oklahoma and so on. But she's just not impressed with that, or Bernie Sanders, or some of the other folks, Keith Ellison, people who just aren't, you know, drawn into that. Am I onto something, or am I off base?
I think you're totally onto something, Richard. I tell you, when in the early days of the Clinton White House, when I would sit in policy meetings with the president and with Hillary, they would policy arguments would be made, and they would tell stories about people that they knew back home in Arkansas. Jimmy down the street who ran a gas station, Johnny who was a guy who'd worked at a sandwich shop that they'd known for years, and they would think about the policies and how they affected those folks. As the years went on, I think you're exactly right. They had less. They were in the bubble of the White House. They had less contact with those kinds of folks. They saw them less. They talked to them less. And the people that they tended to talk to were other politicians, were powerful business people, were powerful donors who would come in for the White House parties. And I just think that there was a drift. And I think that. I think that does tend to happen. I don't think it would happen with folks like you were talking about, with Elizabeth, with Bernie, with Sherrod Brown. I would have a lot of confidence in, or Jeff Merkley. I would have a lot of confidence in. Those folks actually get that the powerful people are not on the side of the people back home that they know, and I think they're more grounded. And I think we need Democrats who are more clearly in touch with regular working people, and whose entire focus is fighting for them. And I think that's what we've missed over the last quarter century since I've been in D.C. and in national politics. Is we've missed the national leadership who really is in touch with regular people. And if we can get that back again, if we can be. I just lost my earplugs here.
All right. Well, no problem. Just get those earplugs back, because I have a follow-up question for you. So, how are you doing?
All right. They seem like they're coming back.
All right. Well, so no problem. So listen, I wanted to, since you mentioned the working class again, you know, I think you make a great point about staying in touch with working people. One of the things you do in this book that I really appreciate and really agree with, and you make the case very clearly, and again, we're talking with Mike Lux, and the book is How to Democrat in the Age of Trump. One of the things you do is you point out something that's been really, that I've been trying to say every way and every platform I can for a long time now, which is that when we talk about, you know, white working class or whatever, we shouldn't make those distinctions. The working class, the concerns of the white working class are the same as, by and large, as the concerns of the black working class, the Latinx working class. That the fact is, we segment out, and I guess that's because there was a notable drift among white working class voters toward Trump and so on. But the fact is, if you speak to the concerns of working people, I feel like you get a twofer there, because you re-engage with the Democratic base at the same time that you might win back some of those drifting working class voters. And maybe you can say something about that.
Well, I completely agree, and that's one of the big points of my book, is that working class folks have a lot more in common than people think. People segment them; they treat them as if they were different species, different groupings entirely that don't have anything in common, and that's what loses elections. Or people say, well, we have to choose; we have to either appeal to the white working class, or we have to appeal to people of color. No, we have to appeal to both. We have to appeal to everybody. And I make the point in my book, Democrats need to stop pussyfooting around on tough issues. And we have to talk about race and class. We have to talk about how what Trump wants to do is divide people of different races so that he can then pick their pockets. And if you talk to people honestly about those issues, if you're straight up front with them, if you deal with them directly and bluntly, I think voters respond to that. I think voters of all categories respond to that.
Well, on the same, I couldn't agree with you more. And on the same, along the same lines, Mike Lux, I wanted to talk to you about, I feel that while there are genuine ideological differences within the Democratic Party, I mean, differences about how we want to solve certain problems and so on, and I think it's healthy to have a conversation about them, about things like charter schools or privatization or whatever, where there may be more than one point of view. I think that there's been a false divide created, and I don't know to what extent it was deliberately created and to what extent it might have been just inadvertent, but I feel as if there's a kind of either-or attitude about what might broadly be defined as identity politics, race, gender, sexual orientation, and class or economic issues, as if you're either for feminism and civil rights and Black Lives Matter and related issues, marriage equality, and so on, or you're for improving the lives of the working class. And I feel as if that's as false a distinction as you can get when one of the manifestations of sexism is that women make 4/5 of what men make. Right. When one of the manifestations of racism is that African American unemployment is double that of white unemployment. We could go on and on, but I feel as if we've allowed ourselves on the left to become divided artificially. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. We've become compartmentalized, and that I talk about that a lot in my book. That there's this, you called a false distinction. It's exactly right. There's this false distinction. Are we going to deal with social issues, or are we going to deal with economic issues? Well, isn't abortion an economic issue? Isn't whether a woman has the right to choose a really fundamental economic issue about her job and her life? Isn't discrimination against people based on their sexual orientation a fundamental economic issue? You're going to be able to fire them over who they are. These are all economic issues, and racism is, you can't get more fundamental in terms of racism than being an economic issue. Criminal justice reform, the for-profit prison industry is the ultimate example of an economic exploiter. Immigration is an economic issue. We need to stop making these false distinctions and having these false choices. We can talk to voters, all voters, white voters, black voters, brown voters. We can talk to all voters about these economic issues, and we can be, if we're honest with people, if we tell people what we believe and what we value, I believe the voters will respond to that. Those who wouldn't respond to those issues are not going to be for us anyway, and we're not going to get the folks who are who are already, firmly in Donald Trump's camp. But I do think we can talk to real voters about all these issues, have the dialogue, and have people respond to us.
I couldn't agree more, and I always point out that all the great social activists of the past also had an economic agenda. Gandhi did the Salt March.
Absolutely, yes.
Martin Luther King wanted to do the Poor People's Campaign at the time of his death, on and on and on. So I guess in closing, Mike Lux, what should people, what kind of people, who did you write this book for, I guess is the question I want to ask.
Well, I wrote it for two different kinds of folks, Richard. One is I want rank and file Democrats to think about how to build an agenda that works for everybody. That isn't like, oh, okay, we got to make a choice between different kinds of people. The Democratic Party should be about uniting people and having an agenda that works for all of them, not picking and choosing. So it's for rank and file Democrats and rank and file activists, grassroots folks, netroots folks. But it's also for people here on the inside. I want the insiders in the Democratic Party to understand how they're messing up with the grassroots, because we can't win elections without the grassroots. We can't win elections without our activist base, without our small dollar contributors, without our volunteers. And I believe that that my old friends in the establishment of the Democratic Party, because I am part of that establishment too, but I believe my old friends are making a big mistake by ignoring or trying to overpower grassroots activists. And so I think there needs to be a stronger bridge built. I think there needs to be folks reaching across that bridge, and I think the grassroots of the party needs to be empowered.
Well, I think I agree with you on all of the above, except that I'm not a member of the Democratic Party establishment. But I think you did a terrific job with this book. I recommend it to anyone who might be listening. So Mike Lux, strategist and author of the new book, How to Democrat in the Age of Trump. Thanks for writing it, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks, Richard. It's good to be here with you.
Same here.